Good evening, all. Welcome to the November 7th edition of the Downers Grove Village Council meeting. If you're here in chambers tonight, glad you're with us. If you're watching on TV, hope you enjoy the meeting this evening. We normally start our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, which we'll do again, but we have some help from Webelos Pack 227. If you guys would come on up and help us get started.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That's a tight ship.
Thank you, boys. Rose, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Barnett,
Here.
Commissioner Jose,
Here.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit,
Here.
Commissioner Gilmartin, Commissioner Glover,
Here.
Commissioner Tully,
Here.
Commissioner Davenport.
Here.
Welcome, everybody. Good to see you. Is there a motion concerning minutes of previous council meetings?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the October 24th, 2023 regular meeting and executive session meeting minutes as presented.
Second.
Any comments or questions from council? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 6-0. Just like that, we're on to item 4 of our meeting. This is the public comments portion of our meeting. And this time, we invite comments from the public on items not on tonight's agenda. There will be opportunity at each agenda item for public comment. So if you have some comments to share with us this evening, come on down to the podium with your comments not on tonight's agenda.
Good evening, Mayor Barnett and Council. I was here several months ago, and I came here to speak about Downers Grove being a friendly community and welcoming for all. This was motivated by quite a number of negative comments that were made at the library board meeting regarding race, LGBT rights, and Indigenous people. Recently, at one of the last library board meetings, comments were made that the library, by extension the village, was anti-Catholic in reference to Indigenous people in the statements made by the library. About 20 people from varying Catholic congregations made these statements. One person even got up holding a rosary in front of her like this, saying that I pray for the board. What is the impression that this gives of the village to the community? These individuals who came from varying congregations, and one of my neighbors even attended because that neighbor had heard, and he's a Catholic, that neighbor had heard that the library is anti-Catholic in its views. Those comments about Indigenous people were made despite the Pope making an apology to Indigenous people on July 28, 2022, and a Jesuit school, namely the Red Cloud Indian Reservation, making amends for past treatment of Indigenous people. Now we're faced with a war thousands of miles from here. However, the news is filled with a rise in anti-Semitism, anti-Islam rhetoric, and threats. Even a young Palestinian child was recently stabbed not far from here. Several questions for the board that I would like to raise for discussion. First, how are we making our community safe for Jews and Muslims, particularly at this time? Secondly, where are the welcoming public comments for persons who do not look like us? Thirdly, with holidays soon approaching, how are we, including Jews, Muslims, African Americans, Hispanics, and non-Christians in the celebration of the holidays that are coming up. I ask that the village make our community a safe and welcoming place to be for all people. Please let me and other residents know how we can help. Thank you.
Thank you. Others?
Mayor, my comments are about the manager's report, the Fairview focus area. Is this the time to say it, or will there be comments?
No, we'll have some comments in the committee room. We'll get into that.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here to join my friend Warner to talk about the issues of welcoming community. I've spoken with you guys about this subject before, and how I know that a lot's being done to try and make this a more welcoming community. In light of what we've seen lately in the news with respect to the challenges, over in Gaza and Israel and the rest of it, I felt I would come and simply say that, it's time to take a look at what's being done in many of our municipalities to make a more concerted effort to stand against the kinds of things that we see and hear regarding, attacks on folk. And I attended some of the library boards where some of the, I would say, ill-advised opinions were expressed. And a phrase that comes to me that I'd like to share, and that I would hope that as a village, and I know you guys are working on things, that I'd like to try and have you think about, is that when you're accustomed to privilege, equality, feels like an attack to you. It's not. It's a person looking to be recognized and acknowledged as being in the city. And it's difficult to make that commitment to look for circumstances where you might do better on these issues. But I've discussed with the police here before some racial incidents regarding some tenants of mine who lived here. But I'm just suggesting and hoping that our board will be more attuned to these things and look at ways that the village itself can take a leadership role in speaking on these kinds of subjects. And I thank you for what you guys have done, and I really look forward to helping out in any way I can as a person connected to this town. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Others? Okay. We'll move on with the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 2 passes 6-0. Item 6 on our agenda is the active agenda. This is the portion of the meeting where we take up issues on which we plan to take action tonight. These are items which have been discussed at least once before, sometimes many times before. Is there a motion concerning an accessory structure?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt an ordinance authorizing a special use to establish an accessory structure before the principal structure is established at 5140 Carpenter Street as presented.
Second.
Are there any audience comments or questions on this item? Comments or questions from the council? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That too passes 6-0. Item 7 on our agenda is the first reading portion. This is the portion of the meeting where we take up items for the first time, or sometimes for the second or third or fifth time, but these are items on which we do not plan to take official action this evening. With that, I'll hand it over to the village manager.
Several items on tonight's first reading agenda, Mayor. We'll start with the proposed FY24 budget. This is the budget which is an alignment of our strategic mission and goals, and follows up on our long-range planning efforts that we had over the summer. You can see from this schedule that this process will take several weeks over the next 2 months, culminating in the adoption of a tax levy ordinance and a budget ordinance. The budget materials provide a great deal of information to the council and the public. And this information is provided to allow the council to approve two key items. The first is the budget ordinance, which establishes the maximum expenses in each of the Village 22 funds. The second is approval of a series of ordinances which establish the village's property tax levy amounts. These will be done in December. Budgeting efforts actually were underway since the summer, when we got together as the long-range plan. Actually, it was 7 meetings. And the Village Council considered newly identified trends and issues and identified priority action items. The Council discussed updated financial information in the general fund and several other funds, and the Council's long-range planning efforts are included and reflected in the FY24 budget. Here are the key points of the budget. We again have a sustainable general fund. We have stabilized and smoothed contributions to our public safety pensions. Once again, there is no change to the property tax levy. That's 3 years in a row. We're contributing $1.25 million from the general fund to the capital fund. We'll hit on those items a little later. I am proud to say that this budget reflects the completion of the Civic Center project that Mike and Enza and so many others have been working on. It provides funding for the long-range plan priority action items that this council identified. It's also a significant increase in staffing, 6.75 new full-time positions, over $21 million invested in our infrastructure, and I'm proud to say over $1 million in funding for our partners at the EDC and Downtown Management Corporation, which we'll hear from later tonight. So the FY24 budget was prepared with great care and attention to detail and reflects the staff's best assessment of revenues and expenses, but there are several factors that could affect the budget as we move through the year. Most of our revenue sources have the potential to be impacted by general economic conditions at the local, at the state and national level, and sometimes even international level. And the state of Illinois controls many of our revenue sources. Most of our expenses are steady and predictable. However, expenses may increase if the village has to provide additional services in response to emergencies. And further, general economic conditions may generally affect our expenses as well. So we will continue to monitor economic conditions with a focus on inflationary pressures and global supply chain issues and those types of things. And like always, throughout 2024, staff will provide reports to the council relative to anything that would be affecting our budgetary performance and propose any modifications as we go. The proposed FY24 budget is affected by the performance and management of the current year, FY23. I want to talk a little bit about how we propose to close out this year. The FY23 general fund revenues are estimated to be $3.3 million higher than the budget. That's good news. And that's driven primarily by strong performance in sales tax and related items, revenue including income tax and ambulance fee revenues. And the FY23 general fund expenses are budgeted to be just about at our budgeted level. So that puts us in really good shape. It allows us to go through a couple of these actions here on the screen, and these are consistent with the strategies expressed by the council over the summer in long-range planning. First, it puts us in a position to bolster the capital fund by transferring $1.75 million into that fund. This will allow us to do an expansion of sidewalk repair and replacement, more street maintenance, and to get ready for beautification efforts in the downtown and Fairview areas. It also allows us to assign $500,000 to our public safety pension stabilization. This is the smoothing that we've talked about before. You'll hear a little bit about that later in the evening. It also allows us to transfer $230,000 into the Civic Center debt service fund. Every dollar we transfer now is a dollar we don't have to levy in property tax in the future years as we pay off those bonds. And then it also allows us to maintain our general fund balance at the amount recommended by our rating agencies. These transfers count as expenses at the end of the year, and so we will have to amend the general fund budget at some point to reflect that these technically are going over budget, but really what it is good news that our revenues are so strong and our expenses are right on budget. So that puts us in a really good position to move forward with FY24. And here's an overview of the proposed budget, starting with our general fund, which is our main operating fund where most of the services are provided. The general fund is budgeted to be sustainable with revenues of $63.4 million and expenses of just over $63 million. The ending fund balance is budgeted to be just shy of $25 million. That's about 40%, 39.5% of annual expenses. Again, that is the number that is consistent with S&P guidelines that allow us to maintain our AAA bond rating. The general fund derives revenues from many sources, the top sources being property tax, sales tax, state shared revenues, including income tax. On the revenue side, total general fund revenue is budgeted to be $63.43 million. That's an increase of about $1.7 million compared to this year's estimate for the year end. That's a 2.75% increase. And key drivers of the change in revenue compared to this year are shown on this slide. Sales tax are budgeted to increase by about $900,000. The revenue from the planned tax levy for public safety pension will increase by $400,000 with a corresponding decrease, that same amount, in the levy for operations. The other revenues from building permits, home rule sales tax, income tax, and ambulance fees are budgeted to be slightly higher than FY23 and are reflective of the economic conditions expected for next year. On the expense side, the expenses are budgeted to be $63.02 million. This is an increase of $2.3 million compared to the FY23 estimate of actual expenses. That is just shy of a 4% total increase. And general fund expenses fall into two major categories: personnel and non-personnel. Personnel expenses account for about 3/4 of our total expenses. And personnel expenses are budgeted to increase by 4.82%, reflecting the additional staffing to support the long-range plan strategic goals that the council previously identified. Non-personnel expenses are budgeted to be approximately $17.5 million. That's about a 1.5% higher than FY23 non-personnel expenses. The FY23 estimated expenses include a $1.75 million transfer to the capital fund that I just mentioned to strengthen the fund in FY24 and beyond as we continue to invest in sidewalk repair and placement, additional street maintenance and beautification efforts in our downtown, and a $1.6 million contribution to our debt service fund to continue to make the debt service payments on the Civic Center bonds. We also wanted to highlight two other key expenses in the general fund budget. The budget includes a $1 million for consulting services for the priority action items, update the comprehensive plan, and the other projects that are related to it. So a significant investment in the council direction and priority actions. It also includes a $1.25 million transfer to capital, as we talked about it earlier, bolstering this fund for things like pedestrian safety and other long-range plan initiatives. I'm proud to report that the proposed budget reflects additional staffing to support long-range plan strategic goals. 2.5 full-time equivalent positions were added as we went through FY23 and are included in the FY24 proposed budget. 4.25 new full-time positions are proposed to be added in FY24, and these staffing additions will allow us to maintain service levels as demand for services increase in areas such as responding to Freedom of Information Act requests, complying with additional police training and reporting requirements as mandated by the state, and to enhance services as directed by the council, including environmental sustainability efforts. With the addition of these positions, the village's total proposed staffing for FY24 still remains under 310 full-time equivalent employees. The proposed budget includes over $1 million for our partner organizations, about $600,000 for the Downers Grove Economic Development Corporation, and about $400,000 for Downtown Management Corporations. And these amounts are consistent with the budgets that were prepared by these organizations. But the best folks to tell you about these budgets are the actual heads, highest ranking staff members of these organizations. So at this point, I will introduce Aaron Venecia from Downtown Management and Brian Gay from the DG EDC, and they have a couple of words about their budgets.
Thank you, David. Good evening, everybody. Mayor, village council members. It's great to be in front of you again this evening. In the packet tonight, you have a budget request for the Downers Grove Economic Development Corporation. But before I go into the details of that, I'd just like to highlight some of the accomplishments that the EDC has had over the past year and kind of give you an idea of what the return on your investment has been over the last 12 months. So to start out with, and I think something that really significant movement that we've made here is regarding the progress on several of the key development areas outlined in our 2021 strategic plan. To begin with is the Ogden Avenue TIF closeout strategy. So we have 2 years left on this on the TIF district along Ogden Avenue there, and working with village staff, we've prepared a plan working with several major developments along the corridor there to use those remaining TIF funds before the end of 2025. We've also prepared a plan for an extension of that TIF project to ensure that whatever projects do come into the pipeline that we provide the appropriate amount of time to close those out before the end of that TIF. The second is the ongoing redevelopment of the Meadowbrook Shopping Center. We've been working with Stelco Properties, the owner of that property, over the last 12 months on the creation of a TIF district, as well as kind of an overall redevelopment plan of the outlots and a number of the inline spaces, facade improvements, so on and so forth. So we also have this body added the Fairview Avenue to your long-range plan. This was another one of those areas outlined in the plan, in our strategic plan as kind of a long-range model for redevelopment within the village. And then last but not least, calls for the creation of EDC's retention programming, which we kind of kicked off in September with our Spark initiative that was funded partially by the State of Illinois Community Navigator Program. Just kind of highlight a couple of things that have come out since we've launched that in September. We've sent out our first 2 email newsletters to over 218 businesses within the village. We also hosted our first Spark event held on October 19th. It was our access to capital for small businesses, and we have several more of those programs prepared and ready to go starting in February of next year. So we have in total about 6 more events, and we plan to have these newsletters go out every month for the next year. So yes, and then last but not least, we did see a return of many of our annual events that were mothballed during the transition from Mr. Cass to myself. So first we had our annual broker event last November, and we are actually preparing for our second as me as head of the organization. That'll be taking place this Thursday. It's a great event where we host about 50 brokers that throughout our community as well as DuPage County to talk about the opportunities available here in Downers Grove for development. We hosted our annual luncheon back in May, and then as well as our holiday open house and the hot cocoa bar that everybody loves. And then last but not least, we also returned to several of the conferences that we've traditionally gone to, those being the ICSC Retail Convention in Las Vegas, as well as ICSC Chicago Deal Making, and we've added a new one that we'll be attending next week. It's the IAAPA, which is a family amusement and sports convention, talking with developers, operators to potentially look at opportunities here in Downers Grove for redevelopment. So with that, I'd like to just get into some of the details regarding our request here. So as Village Manager Fieldman had mentioned, we have a funding request, $595,000. Of this, we project approximately $11,000 in cash to be carried over into 2024. We will continue to maintain our $50,000 in contributions through our partnership through Prosperity Program, and then maintaining our ability to cover any costs with revenues from our annual luncheon of $12,000. This in total, along with the funding request from the village, allows us to cover all operating expenses for FY24 of $668,000. those items that we saw the largest increases, I think were no real surprise for us. These are technology, wages, data and subscriptions, as well as DuPage Convention and Visitors Bureau. And so we see all these within line in what we expected year over year. And then this increase does allow us to look at a one-time cost of a hotel study to take a look at the current mix of hotel offerings within the village. So with that, and then last, we also, this budget request also allows us to maintain our $200,000 special project fund, which allows us to, if an opportunity were to present itself, to be able to go out and provide any matching funds for any grants that may become available over the next year or so. And with that, I'd answer any questions.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Erin Venezia, and I'm the Executive Director for Downers Grove Downtown Management. I am happy to provide insight to the budget of Special Service Area Number 11. This budget maintains the levy from the previous year for the commercial property owners within SSA Number 11, but also provides approximately a 4% increase, which will cover the cost of rising prices. Our Board of Directors is made up of 4 business owners and 4 property owners within the SSA. While keeping in mind our organization's mission and the strategic plan, our Board of Directors passed the budget in front of you. Our organization is currently staffed by 1 full-time employee and 2 part-time employees. Our staff stays busy putting on the events in the downtown, marketing the downtown, and continuously working to bring potential businesses to our property owners. This year, we were able to continue to increase our advertising with media that have previously been cost prohibitive to us, such as Chicago Magazine and WGN Radio. This budget will also allow us to continue to explore new avenues as well as evaluate the old. The advertising is used to not only promote the events we host in the downtown, but also to promote downtown Downers Grove in general. Costs to host the events have risen, and this budget allows us to continue to tweak our events as needed to be able to host relevant events and remain competitive with our neighboring towns. In fact, a few have even called us to ask how we've done certain elements, all while being fiscally responsible. In addition to our larger events, such as Ice Festival, Wine Walk, Friday Night Live, Sidewalk Sale, Fine Arts Festival, and Small Business Weekend, to name a few, we also run promotional events such as the Loyal to Local program, which is run in the summer, and the Candy King Cash Rewards program, which runs throughout the holiday season. These programs encourage our residents to support local as well as put money directly back into the downtown businesses. We also do a direct mail coupon book that is a co-op piece with 20 businesses, and we mail this to approximately 22,000 households in Downers Grove and neighboring communities. In the past year, downtown Downers Grove welcomed 9 new businesses, and our first floor occupancy rate is approximately 98%. Our organization will continue to work with interested parties in finding them the perfect location. We maintain a list of available properties on our website as another avenue to help connect the property owners with prospective tenants. We also maintain a list of businesses that are looking to open in the downtown to assist the property owners when they are looking for a potential tenant. We serve as a conduit between the property owners and prospective businesses, and we also hold several business owner meetings a year to gather more ideas. Over the last few years, we have been adding aesthetic elements to the downtown. We will continue to maintain the planters in the downtown. In this past year, we updated the summer pole banners. In the next week or 2, you will start to see the large lighted holiday decor go up in the downtown to complement the decorations that the village has put up. We are working on finalizing our 2024 event calendar, which will look similar to the 2023 event calendar, but can be completed once the 2024 funding is approved. I look forward to our continued partnership with the village and working towards making downtown Downers Grove the best place it can be for our community and future community members. I'm excited for the future of our downtown, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you, Aaron.
Mayor, I'll continue. I think I'm going to go ahead and present the property tax levy before we turn it over to the council for any questions and comments. So we'll go right on to the property tax levy. And our budget relies on several sources of revenue, but the property tax is one of the most significant sources, accounting for approximately a quarter of our general fund budget. The village levies taxes in a specific amount, or a levy. The village does not establish a tax rate. And property taxes, the property taxes that are due to the village on any particular property are based on the property's value compared to the value of all other properties in the village. Our property tax levy consists of multiple components that support specific services and obligations of our village. And the two most significant components of the levy are the levy for operations and the levy for public safety pension contributions. The taxes from several other taxing bodies also appear on the very same tax bill that folks receive. The FY24 property tax levy of $16.89 million is the same as it was in FY23 and FY22. The levy for required contributions to the public safety pension will increase by $415,000, and the operations levy will decrease by that same exact amount. This flat levy approach is intended to allow the village to reduce the impact of property on property taxpayers of continuing increases in the public safety pension contributions. All right, so this slide shows a little more detail about the components of the FY24 levy. You will note on the bottom there, the bottom line, the total levy remains unchanged. And in FY24, the levy for public safety pensions will be $9.9 million, an increase of $415,000 over the levy in that same category last year. This approach to the levy is consistent with the assignment for public safety pension stabilization in the general fund balance, which will allow the village to continue to make the required contributions to the funds while smoothing the impact of the property taxpayers. Beginning in 23, the current year, the village began smoothing the total property levy by levying more than the required public safety pension contributions, holding this amount in our general fund in 23, and using it in 24 for future pension contributions. In FY23, $500,000 of the general fund balance is planned to be used for future public safety contributions. This practice of smoothing will continue in 24 and beyond, and is formalized with the creation of what we call a public safety pension stabilization assignment. A portion of our general fund balance will be noted as assigned to be used only for future contributions to the pension funds. At the end of 24, at the end of next year, just over $600,000 will be in that assignment, the budget holds, allowing us to continue to smooth the impact of property taxpayers for many years to come. So in FY23, current year, a typical residential property with a market value of just over $400,000 paid about $788 to the village. While the value of this typical residential property will likely increase, the amount of taxes paid to the village in 2024 will remain unchanged. That's because our levy is remaining unchanged. And you're thinking to yourself, boy, I pay a lot more in my tax bill than $788, and that is a correct statement, because the village portion of the property tax bill comprises only about 10% of the total bill. The other taxing bodies, such as schools, parks, and county, account for the remaining 90% of the bill, as shown here in our now iconic dollar bill graphic. So that is, even though it's a long presentation, it really is a brief overview of the general fund and the property tax levy. And before we talk about related funds, we will pause, see if the council has any questions or comments. Mayor?
Thanks, Dave. There's a lot to digest in one sitting. Anybody got anything they want to throw in the hopper or ask questions about? Mark?
Thank you, Mayor. Combination of observations and questions. Appreciate the very thorough presentation, a lot of detail, a lot of information was provided in advance, a lot of information will be provided going forward. I've just got to say that this is a far cry from most of the budget discussions I've had in the last 20 years, and a real far cry from 2008 and 2009 when we were sitting up here trying to figure out how to cut another $1 million or $2 million out of the budget. Those are not polite conversations, and I always hate to be the voice of doom and gloom, but things are cyclic, and right now I think we have a luxury of having the ability to do some of the things that staff just described, including increasing staff for well-designed purposes, adding $1 million, as was mentioned, for other goals and objectives, being very responsible with respect to our keeping a healthy reserve, addressing public safety pension fund stabilization, robust capital, infrastructure, maintenance, and investment. And I'm always a fan of paying down or accelerating the paying down of debt when we can, so I like to see that as well. So this is all fantastic. I just wouldn't get used to it. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So let's do what we can, but this is a very different environment than what I think prior councils have had to deal with over time. So this is somewhat of a luxury. A couple other comments. One, the requested amounts from downtown management and the EDC, I think, are well worth it. I think we know and can demonstrate the returns on those investments are manyfold what the dollars are that go in. So that is terrific to see that we're able to continue to support that partnership in the way we have in the past. I'll come back later with some but overall tax levies and tax rate discussions and how that works. But I did have one question, and that was with respect to some of the capital projects. I know I'm getting probably a little ahead, but I'm going to do it because I've got the floor. Are there any projects planned for 2024, even 2025, and I guess we'll just stick to 2024, that, for example, given some of the high priority action items that we have, in particular, I'm thinking of the topic we're going to have a conversation about after this, which is the Fairview Catalyst site. Are there any, for example, projects planned for the Fairview sub area, and I know there are some proposed in the budget, that would benefit from a different timing? I'm guessing not, but I want to just ask the question. This is the consummate question of, you never want to tear something up or do something and then have to redo it again several years later. And I think the answer is no, but I want to at least ask that question out loud.
So you may recall over the summer, this is really what got us started on implementing the recommendations in the Fairview area. We had a capital project plan that included some sidewalk work and some replacement of streetlights, et cetera. And we decided, before we take that on, we better start implementing the entirety of the Fairview plan. With that in mind, there may be one or two projects, including a purchase of a flood-prone property that you'll see coming up. We'll hit that in a little bit more detail next week when we present information on all the capital funds, capital, stormwater, water. So, Commissioner, if you don't mind, we'll answer that question in our presentation next week.
That's perfectly fine. Consider that a heads up. That's all I have for now, Mayor. I know we have many more conversations on this topic.
Thanks, Martin. Anyone else? No? I'm going to piggyback on Martin's doom and gloom. Not so much doom and gloom, but just to remind folks two things. First of all, please do spend some time with this budget. It's available online. There's a lot of detail there. And the more informed you are, the better we make decisions because we get your input. But it is true, a couple of things just to put some more context to it. About 90% of operating the village on a day in and day out basis does not come from property taxes. 90%, which is great for all the property taxpayers. It is also true that 90% of what the village does is not really discretionary. We're there when you dial 911, we're pushing snow out of the way, and we're keeping your water flowing. So, to Martin's point, things often are cyclical, except for the demand of services. And so this is a great situation we're in now, and I'm thankful that we should all be thankful for this opportunity to operate this way and to try and smooth some of our future obligations, to be sure. But when it comes to 2008, or for that matter 2020 or 2020, you'll find your village may have to adjust, and I'm pretty sure everybody's expecting all those same services. So it's just some additional context. We have a great situation in front of us. We're blessed to be in this spot. But I know, irrespective of what sales tax revenues might be for 2024, everybody is expecting the same response and same service levels. So we need to just keep that in mind. The only other thing I wanted to highlight is this pension stabilization. That's a relatively new operating process for this village. But it makes a ton of sense, and it serves to try and buffer some of those ups and downs. That is the one component which we have some idea of what it will look like long term, 10, 15 years down the road, and it is a pretty steep, continuous incline. So any efforts that we make, whether it's this year or next year or the year after that, to try and soften that are ones I'm sure all the residents will appreciate. Anyone else? Back to you, Dave.
We've enjoyed a great budget performance for the last 3 or so years, and many of the current council members had to deal with the cost cutting related to the COVID era pandemic and that. I just want to compliment this council for being strategic and focused on smoothing future impacts, being strategic in telling us to invest that revenue performance in the public safety pensions, in avoiding future tax increases on the civic center bond payments, and forward focusing on bike and pedestrian improvements in there. So I think a very prudent and smart choice investing those revenue dollars in the past couple years and the next couple years moving ahead. So village staff is prepared to make presentations on funds that are related to the general fund, things like the health insurance fund, the risk management fund, equipment replacement fund, and fleet services fund. We're happy to do that tonight. Our finance director, Robin Leahy, is here. I will remind everybody in the public that the council members have each been briefed individually in some great detail prior to this budget coming out. So, Mayor, I'll leave it to you if you would like us to go through these. They're certainly published online and available for viewing, or we can move on to the next agenda as the council's call.
I think I'd like you to go through them, Dave, but I do want to remind the public, too, following up on what Dave just mentioned, that we've been briefed. That's true. We also have planned, we've talked about this in the past, our budget planning process is really a function of a, 4 to 6 month cycle of planning where we try and figure out the challenges that are ahead of us as well as what we think our work plan the next year looks like, and that really all feeds this. So if you see a lack of sort of questions from the council, it's not for lack of interest or lack of insight. It's just simply another step in what's an ongoing process.
Well, we are pleased to introduce our finance director, Robin Leahy, who will present information on the funds related to the general fund.
Thank you, Dave. Good evening, Mayor and Council. So tonight I will be presenting on these 4 funds coming up. These are related to the general fund, and they are considered related to the general fund because they are primarily funded from the various departments in the general fund. So the first fund is the health insurance fund. Now this fund accounts for all the financial activity related to the village-administered health plans for employees and participating partner agencies. This fund is having a strong year in 2023 with estimated revenues greater than expenses, which will end up increasing our ending cash balance. So this puts us in a favorable position in 24 to use some of this cash balance because we have budgeted expenses slightly higher than revenues due to anticipated higher claims. But the ending cash balance in the fund is budgeted to be $3.1 million. The village does continue to work with our insurance consultants and to control expenses through various programs and innovative tactics, such as virtual medical visits and international brand medication programs. The next fund is the Risk Management Fund, and this accounts for all the financial activity related to the village's workmen's compensation and liability insurance programs. Revenues are budgeted at $2 million, which is approximately the same as fiscal year 23 estimates, but the expenses are budgeted a little higher, about $1 million higher than 2023 due to anticipated higher claims. The ending cash balance in this fund for fiscal year 24 is budgeted to be a little bit under $2.5 million. The next fund is the Equipment Replacement Fund. And this fund is used to provide a dedicated funding source for equipment that gets replaced on a routine basis. Expenses for fiscal year 24 are budgeted to be about $4.49 million, which is about $1.7 million higher than fiscal year 2023 estimates. But this is due to the anticipated purchase of a ladder truck and 2 ambulances for the fire department. The ending cash balance is budgeted to be about $3.43 million. Supply chain issues, long lead times, and rising inflation on vehicles continues to be challenges for this fund. The last related fund is the Fleet Services Fund. And this fund accounts for all the costs to maintain and operate the village's fleet. Fiscal year '24 expenses in this fund are budgeted to increase by about $100,000, which is a little over 4% over '23. This is primarily due to higher costs for vehicle parts and supplies. The ending cash balance for fiscal year '24 is about $1.7 million budgeted, which is relatively unchanged from fiscal year '23. That is all I have for these funds, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Robin. Any questions specific to these funds?
Not these.
Okay, I don't have a question, Robin, but again, for some of the public that might be watching, we do engage in what's called fund accounting here. And so you'll see some funds go up and some funds go down over the course of the year. We try and plan for known expenses. That's essentially what's going on. Please take time, again, to look through the budget, and if you have questions, email us. We'll do our best to answer them or consider what your comments are. Thanks, Robin.
And
Thank you.
the budget fund is really just on the front end. Next week, we will present information on capital, stormwater, water, and some related, so this is capital projects, things that Commissioner Tully was talking about. So more to come next week. If any council member has any questions, of course, let us know. We publish written answers to all council questions, budget related, on our website. With that, we can move on to the second item on tonight's first reading agenda, which is an ordinance repealing the amusement device licensing. Under our current code, establishments that operate things like arcade games are required to obtain an amusement device license. This is a requirement that's been on the books since the Pac-Man fever era of the early 80s. We only have one establishment that currently holds a license. We did a review of this and have determined that it is no longer necessary given modern operations, so we recommend repealing of the requirement for these licenses. Enz and I are here to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Dave. Any comments or questions from the audience on this? Council comments or questions? Leslie, please.
Yeah, I can give some context. I was the one who kind of put this one forward. I actually had someone ask why there was such a large fee if they just wanted to put a pinball machine in their business just for fun, you know, not to make money, but just as kind of an entertainment value. And was talking back and forth with some of the village staff and learned that it was just kind of one of those old moments when people were making money off of arcades and arcade games back from the 80s. And now, of course, we mostly use these for nostalgia purposes and you know, playing them, maybe, you know, a business might want one or two just for fun. So to give a little bit more context about where this came from, that was where this started. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else?
It might have made sense back when Just Games was still around, but it's been a long time.
Yeah, I remember riding my bike from Clarendon Hills to Just Games. It was a long time ago. This is pretty normal, guys, in a community this age and this size with this scope. There are ordinances that come and go, and this is not that different than some of the code cleanups we have to do periodically. It's just part of the evolution of the community. Continue, Dave.
The final two items on tonight's first reading agenda concern the DuPage Water Commission and contracts related thereto. The items are an ordinance executing a water purchase and sale contract between the Water Commission and its customer municipalities. Second item is a resolution authorizing the commission to extend its water supply contract with the City of Chicago. The Village of Downers Grove purchases water from the Water Commission, like most of the other municipalities in our county, and then we turn around and sell it to our local end users, our local water customers. The DuPage Water Commission purchases water from the City of Chicago and then sells it to the DuPage municipalities. Two contracts govern this sale arrangement, and both of those contracts are set to expire next year. First, I want to talk about the new DuPage Water Commission customer contract. The original contract has been in place for 30-plus years, and the new contract is proposed for a term of 40 years. And there are only minor changes, and they are outlined in the staff report. Mainly, they just clarify things that have come up in the 30 years or so of operating under this contract. The next is the authorizing DuPage Water Commission to extend its contract with the City of Chicago. The Water Commission has pursued negotiations with the city for a new contract for the last several months, and no new contract is imminent. But the good news is the current contract allows the Water Commission to do a one-time extension of up to 40 years, an extension of the current contract. And the Water Commission is pursuing an extension in the time frame of 15 to 20 years. And during that time frame, they would do two things. One is pursue a potential alternative water source supply that would no longer rely on the city of Chicago. That would give them enough time to look at it, do a feasibility study, and actually construct it and begin operating it in that 15 to 20 year time frame if that were to come to fruition. And the second is to understand the financial impacts to the DuPage Water Commission of Joliet connecting to the Chicago water system, which is expected around 2030 or 2032. Not to get into a lot of details, but the pricing model that the city is using with the city of Joliet might have some positive impacts to the DuPage Water Commission of the current contract. So staff does recommend approval of both an ordinance executing a new water purchase and sale contract between the Water Commission and customer municipalities, and a resolution authorizing the Water Commission to extend its existing water supply contract with the city of Chicago. Enz and I are here to answer any questions you may have about that item. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Dave. Any comments or questions from the audience? Comments or questions from the council? Martin?
I will absolutely be happy to support anything that would allow the customers of the DuPage Water Commission and the commission itself to negotiate better contract terms with the city or provide alternatives. History will tell some of us how we got stuck with some things that were pretty hard to swallow sometimes, that were passed downriver to us from Chicago, that purported to pertain to the cost of delivering of service and had absolutely nothing to do with the cost of delivery of service. Were simply a way for the city of Chicago to try to balance its budget on the backs of the suburbs, and particularly customers of the Water Commission. So any opportunity to ameliorate and address those issues would be very welcome. And if extending this gives us the opportunity and the leverage to do so, along with other customer municipalities, then I'm all for it.
Anyone else? Thank you, Dave.
That ends our first reading tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Is there an attorney's report?
Thank you, Mayor. 2 items to present tonight. The first is an ordinance repealing Section 8.12 of the Municipal Code regarding amusement devices, and the second is an ordinance approving a water purchase and sales agreement between the village and the DuPage Water Commission. Both will be on next week's active agenda.
Thank you. Item 9 is our mayor's report. I have no report tonight, so we'll move on to item 10, which is council member reports. It's an opportunity for council members to report out on goings on in the community, other organizations they're working with, or items they think we should know about. Mike, we'll start with you.
No report, Mayor.
Danny.
No report, Mayor. Thank you.
Leslie.
No report, Mayor. Thank you.
Martin.
No report at this time, Mayor.
Pressure's on.
Clean sweep.
All right. All right, we are going to take about a 5-minute break, and we will be moving with our manager's report over to the committee room. All are welcome to join us there. We'll be talking a little bit about the Fairview Focus Area implementation. Meeting, and we're here to talk about the Fairview Area Implementation Plan. Dave, you can start us off tonight.
Yeah, this is discussion number 2 of the Fairview Focus Area implementation. 3 things we're going to do tonight. They're up on the whiteboard on the left side if you're in the room. 3 things we're going to do are we're going to review the 2017 comprehensive plan, which includes the Fairview Focus Area that we are implementing. Then we're going to review the priority action item and the components that make it up. And then really what our primary objective here tonight is to confirm the council direction that was provided when we talked about this on October 17th regarding boundaries and some clarification on some land use recommendations. And if we get through all 3 of those things, we are well positioned to start working on the rezoning efforts in the Fairview area. And with that, I'm pleased to introduce our Community Development Director, Stan Popovich.
Thank you, Manager Fieldman. Good evening, Mayor and Council. As we noted, tonight's agenda, we've pulled it out a little bit more than the 3 main objectives. We talked about the Fairview Area Plan Implementation Project, discuss what a comprehensive plan is, what a focus area is, review the recommendations from the Fairview Focus Area Plan from the 2017, and then with the implementation, review the components, the boundaries, and the land use recommendations tonight. So that's what we'll be going through tonight. As you recall, there's a number of priority action items. The Fairview Plan implementation is one of the many items we'll be working on throughout this process. These are the 7 items that consist of the implementation for this plan. They're written up here as well. We'll go over these a little quickly tonight to give us a brief background on those guys. As a staff, we split them up into short-term, mid-term, and long-term ideas with an ongoing idea here as well. The ongoing one is business attraction and retention efforts. That's something the EDC and village staff do on an ongoing basis. That will continue to take place as well. We'll start with the long-term items, which are the redevelopment of the commuter parking lots is one of the 7 items. This would involve a review of transit ridership and parking, review BNSF agreements for parking there. The village only owns one of the lots at the metro station. Their other lots are owned by BNSF. So it develop a public process for this. So this is more of a long-term idea that we would undertake in the longer term. With the midterm, we would see the financial policies and incentives for redevelopment. That could include a TIF district potentially. The TIF district boundaries would have to be established. It may not include all of the boundaries that are going to ultimately be within our planning boundary in the area we're going to study. So these boundaries, the planning boundary might be bigger, TIF might be smaller, rezoning might be smaller. It's all sort of interrelated, but they might not be all one and the same with every property included in all of them. It could include a business improvement district. Any village role related to land purchasing would be at this stage 2 here in the midterm. And financing policies and mechanisms to pay for public improvements, that would be capital improvement, debts, loans, grants, and TIF or bid funds. And you can see Manager Fieldman was nice enough to write these things down here for us. So everything in blue and in red is future projects and ongoing with the business attraction and retention. Short term, like Manager Fieldman spoke of tonight, we want to define the area included in this project. It's going to be a planning boundaries, we call it, planning boundaries, study boundary. What will we implement? Where would we want to implement those recommendations? That would lead to amendments to the zoning ordinance and zoning map. It's really about implementing the comprehensive plan recommendations for 2017 for the area. We did print out a packet for everybody that has that comprehensive plan section for the Fairview focus area. The next steps would be to develop a regulatory framework. You might recall when we did the downtown, we sort of talked into some generalities about the regulatory framework, like we were buildings 3 to 4 stories, close to the street, the bulk should be about this much, but not really into regulations. After the regulatory framework, we would establish zoning districts and regulations. Again, the rezonings could include properties within all the properties, but most likely it's probably not going to include all of them, because some of the zoning might be appropriate, what we find through our studies here as well. And then the streetscape and landscape improvements, our last thing, that's part of the comprehensive plan update project that we are currently reviewing bids on. We hope to start end of this year, 1st of next year. So really tonight we're going to focus on these first 2 items here, defining the area and then the amendments and some of the land use recommendations. So I'm going to slow down a little bit here to go over some of the comprehensive plan items that we have, just review what a comprehensive plan is. So first, it's really a long-range vision for the plan. What do we want us to be in 5, 10, 20 years? It sets forth policies and goals and objectives. It also is the foundation for decision-making. So in all of our entitlement cases, you'll see that staff recommends and how it complies with the comprehensive plan, or maybe there's some issues with it, or how a plan that's proposed today ties into this visionary document. It informs regulatory tools, so things come out of this and you can say, hey, maybe we need to change our zoning ordinance because of a recommendation in the comp plan. It helps ensure quality of life remains high in the community. It is not legally binding, so again, it's not a legally binding document. It's very aspirational, it's very ideal. So it's not, anything written in there is not legal, that's all coming through the zoning ordinance and where the legal obligations come through. Comprehensive plan is made up of many different plans. A land use plan, this is our future land use plan. It tells us, hey, we want single family detached in these yellow areas. Downtown is a mixed use area. So it really identifies where the village envisions these areas going. Smaller plans include residential areas, commercial areas, a transportation plan, what's our network as it is, what do we see it being in the future. Talks about parks and open space. It talks a little bit about our partners as well, and the school districts and the park district. Community facilities, so what are our community facilities? Key focus areas, we have 7 of those. Fairview is one of those as well. And then it does provide implementation as well. Quickly to go into zoning. In simple terms, zoning is telling a private property owner what they can do, how they can use their property. We have a zoning table that says this use in the zoning district is appropriate, this use is a special use. How many structures they can build, that was something we did tonight with the accessory structure on the lot before principal structure. Where they can put those structures, those are all setbacks, 5 feet, 10 feet, 25 feet. And how large those structures can be. So that's a couple different ways of floor area ratio, bulk, density, different ideas. But this is really about what these folks can do with their property. There's two purposes that are shown in the zoning ordinance. Protect and promote health and safety and general welfare of the community, and implement the policies and goals contained within the comprehensive plan and other adopted plans. This is what we try to avoid. We really like this picture because it shows a lot of what we're trying to do with zoning ordinance to avoid this, where there's something built really large next to a little house. Moving back to the comprehensive plan with the focus area for the Fairview focus area. Really, these focus areas are sort of sub-area plans or mini comprehensive plans for specific areas. They're focused on small geographic areas, so not a large area, but we do have some differing size. Like we have the Ellsworth Industrial Park and we have Fairview and downtown. So they all sort of a little different size. Each focus area is unique, and what we find is that there's detailed recommendations and focus recommendations, overarching goals for the focus area, what we want to see that focus area be, and then site-specific recommendations, and it also talks about catalyst sites. So catalyst sites are really sites that if they redevelop, they would have a positive impact on other neighboring properties. So if I redevelop my property's catalyst site, maybe that Manager Fieldman's property will reinvest or redevelop as well. So really trying to improve that area through those sites. So how are the focus areas selected? Generally, they're economic generators, so each of the areas that we selected have an economic impact. They're some of the most intensely developed portions of the village, so Fairview, downtown, Ogden Avenue obviously is very, very developed. They include transportation facilities that connect the village to the region, so 355, 88, Ogden, the train tracks, all really important, which also makes them all highly visible to passing motorists and transit riders, and then also the community members as well. They do contribute greatly to the perception of the village by residents and visitors. We heard it tonight with the downtown, like how great it is and how we love to keep that going. So that really contributes to the perception of the village. And areas that might have a little bit of issues, and if they are addressed, they could improve those areas, both functionally and aesthetically, and then also contribute to the perception of the village, visible and include transportation. So like I said, we have 7, downtown, or Belmont, Ellsworth, downtown, Butterfield, 75th Street, 63rd, Fairview, and Ogden. Those were all in the 2017 comprehensive plan. The Fairview focus area, there's a whole bunch of information in the comp plan. It's about 6 pages or so. When we go over each of these a little bit here, there's a general description of the area, provides a vision like we talked about for the area. There's 17 key concepts that are written down in text. Staff has sort of identified those as land use, parking, transportation, streetscape, and economic development. There's a lot of maps on here, including a map with 8 recommendations. There's an identification of catalyst sites with recommendations for those catalyst sites. A redevelopment concept plan with 8 conceptual redevelopment projects. There are some guiding principles that are in there too, and the recommendations, lastly, for identity and placemaking, LEED ND, which is a U.S. Green Building Council, neighborhood design, and transit-oriented development. So we'll start with sort of the Fairview focus area. This is the vision. This is actually on page 23 of the comprehensive plan. This is the vision statement for the village, village-wide, and this is looked in retrospective. So it was 2031. What does somebody say about the Fairview Station area? So the Fairview Station area continues to evolve into the well-organized, revitalized, and unique multi-use area imagined in the comprehensive plan. Its growth as a cohesive neighborhood and its attractiveness to those outside the community have resulted in enhanced metro service and other local transportation improvements. So I think this is what we're trying to do tonight, is how do we get to this? Things have changed, right, since the pandemic, and with transportation and metro and everything else since that time, but that's what we're here to talk about, and how we make this vision reality. And maybe there's some things that are different in it once we go through our comprehensive plan again, but this is what we're really shooting for. This is the vision that people talked about: revitalized, unique, cohesive neighborhood, and it's attractive. There are 8 guiding principles that are found in the comprehensive plan. It's an emphasis on infill development. There's not really any green fields over there, so it's all infill and redevelopment. Improvements to open space and stormwater. I think that's something we talk about a lot in a lot of different areas. Buildings oriented towards the street with parking in the rear. That has a feel, more like the downtown, a little cohesive neighborhood as well. There are some areas over there that have, parking in the street, more of a suburban development. Increased density and an emphasis on mixed use within a quarter mile of the station. So it's transit-oriented development. Shared parking facilities to minimize surface parking lots. So how do we take that and provide open space and stormwater facilities and provide parking, but still provide minimizing those number of parking lots. Continuation of the street grid, improve pedestrian and bicycle connections, and avoid development in floodplains and environmentally sensitive areas. That's something that we want to strive for as the guiding principles for this area. And then also identity and placemaking we talked about with the lead ND, sustainable, and then transit-oriented development as well. So these are some of the key concepts. Again, economic development, this would more fall into the further future ideas here with economic development incentives. Parking and transportation, this is these 4 items, the key concepts here, are going to fall into our comprehensive plan with our consultant when they do the bike and pedestrian plan, these areas as well. We go into streetscapes. Again, this is going to be falling underneath the comprehensive plan consultant with these guys to talk about a streetscape vision and a streetscape idea for the Fairview and how to enhance gateway features and some of these other items. What we're talking about tonight is land use and development regulations. So there's 7 of those total on the next 2 screens. Redevelopment sort of street, neighborhood commercial, be really site specific with dumpster enclosures and dumpster screening, along with parking lot screening. And then the last 3 are land uses are appropriate. However, like we talked about at our 17th meeting in October, updating the built form, mixed use, and then buffer nearby residential areas from the impacted commercial uses. As I said, there's a lot of maps. So this map that appears on page 123 really talks about some of the key concepts that were put in. Gateway here, this is improved pedestrian crossing at the railroad tracks. So some of those items. As we talked about on the 17th as well, the unique thing with the boundaries there is they're written in words instead of maps and lines. So we had Hummer Park to the north, east is the village limits, and south and west are the residential neighborhoods. So again, verbally what the boundaries should be. Tonight we're going to be talking about a map with a line. The Fairview Focus Catalyst site recommendations, you can see there's 6 catalyst sites listed. The only thing that's not a catalyst site is the village's metro parking lot there. But this is, again, identifying what sites could redevelop, and then in each of those catalyst sites, they do have specific recommendations for those sites. You may recall when the development here at the corner of Fairview and 2nd came in, that was somebody that the village uses these catalyst sites not only at Fairview but in other focus areas. If someone calls, hey, what's the village looking for? We say, hey, we have a catalyst site, we have a description about what the village is looking for. So this is very helpful for staff and for the public to understand when they're looking for redevelopment opportunities what the village might be foreseeing coming at this location. And then this is a Fairview redevelopment concept shown on page 126. Again, this is just one concept of what could be many concepts at this location. It just gives an idea of if things were to redevelop, what is one vision? There's multiple visions, there's multiple ideas about what could happen here based on the ideas. This is just one conceptual idea of how it could look in the future if we were to implement our 2017 plans. So what we're here tonight to do is to confirm that this priority action item does call to implement the 2017 comprehensive plan Fairview focus area. So we'd like to get confirmation that we do indeed want to move forward in implementing the recommendations that were shown tonight on the board. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
So that was the review of the comp plan. This is the focus area that the council told us over the summer that we should be implementing. And we just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page, man.
Which is a good thing to do. So there's two things. One is this issue and the other is the line. Whether we like our line.
I'm sorry?
Line.
The line. So the first thing we're going to talk about is, are we on the same page? We're implementing the plan as described herein. So that's the first thing. When I guess anybody feels like that's not what they want to do or has questions about what that means, now would be the time to say so. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody saying anything, so I'm thinking that's a yes.
Good, so far we're 1 for 1 on
That makes this whole thing easy.
Since I wasn't here last time, I will vocalize yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, the issue is laid out is important that we understand that what we're talking about is the 17 plan, right? That we're not talking about changing that plan, we're talking about implementing that plan. And last time we met, we talked a little bit around that, a little bit in some rabbit trails off of that. And so this is sort of a check down on that. I think we're all on the same page. Leslie?
Yeah, I mean, in general, again, this is guiding a visionary document, right? And for the most part, yeah, I totally agree with the vision that's in here. I mean, we talked about it in our one-on-one meetings a little bit about how it like contradicts things a little, and so I know one of the things that came up was the setbacks here are a little bit off of what we discussed in other places, so obviously we'll have to work through those. But yes, in general, this vision is what I would like to see for Fairview.
Okay.
We did meet with that property owner, Stan and I, earlier today, and explained, he got
Yeah.
the same presentation,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then it was clicking, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that's not set in stone, no, that's just one idea. So he was very pleased with that, we had a great conversation with Mr. Johnson.
I'd just like to offer that something, expand a little bit on something that Stan shared, and that's when somebody makes an inquiry about what's our vision, what are we thinking about, not only with this focus area, but the others as well. This is a document that exists right now and is being shared with people in terms of this is what's being presented as our vision. And so a little nuance to the discussion. I see this as basically finally taking action in seeing that that vision put into reality and doing things to help jumpstart that process, right? So we're not coming up with something new here, but rather acting on something that already exists as a guiding light for people coming to town right now, thinking about how to, or current residents, what's the vision for this area? This is the comprehensive plan that's been in place for the last 6 years. So I'm excited to see this go forward, and I too agree with everything that's in this.
Yeah, if I can just add, Mayor, the key thing is the rezoning, because we can draw all kinds of maps in the world, and we know what happened with downtown, is once you actually, and the lines are important because you can't rezone until you have the lines. You need the lines.
Yep.
Once you do your rezoning, then you've said to the world, beyond just the comprehensive plan, that you've actually now changed the underlying zoning to support the types of uses that you want. The setbacks and floor area ratios or things like that, we can tweak later. But the thing that I think is really important is that then says to the world that you are open for business and you're inviting interest in these things. And the more we can encourage private buy-in to that plan, the better, because once they see what can be done, it gives Brian, for example, an opportunity to market things as such. Whereas right now, if you were to say, hey, could you put a such and such on this corner? Well, no, it's not zoned for it. But I can get it zoned for you. Well, that's one story, but it's already zoned for it.
Right.
Then you start to see an interest in outside interest. Now the proposals start to come to us. And we may end up having a slightly different vision down the road, because it's one thing to have a vision, it's another thing to actually have people come to you and say, here's what I want to do. And you may, yeah, right. You know what I'm talking about, Commissioner?
Yes.
Maybe that's happened once or twice. So the most important thing, I think, is I completely agree with the lines. I agreed with them in 2017. I agree with them now. Getting that zoning done is really important, because it gets that message out there as to what can be done, and it facilitates and encourages a lot of private activity that I think we want to facilitate and encourage, because it then lessens what we have to do later down the steps, which of course is always a good thing. So yeah, I think the zoning is really key, and that's an important next step.
That's the first part of the implementation. This has been sitting on paper, and a lot of good work was done to get us to that point, but now we have to actually do something.
Rezoning now says, I mean it.
Greg?
Right. Excuse me. And thinking about Martin's point on rezoning, it's also where with downtown things ground to a screeching halt. And we had, I don't know how many knockdown, drag-out meetings in this room about what's the downtown zoning going to look like. So I think it's good that we're confirming where we want to go with regard to the comprehensive plan portion of it, because while we have an opportunity to move a little more expeditiously here, things might slow down a little bit when we come to the zoning piece, because that's really where the rubber meets the road. So hopefully we can keep the momentum. I too am on board with this. I'd like to, I guess, underline the idea that the current land uses are appropriate for now. But obviously that's not really what we're hoping exists in another 20, 30 years. So
Well, we'd be remiss if we didn't take the items that have been teed up by the last two comments, actually go there. So if it's all right with you,
Please,
Mayor, we'll actually start that very discussion by confirming some direction we heard on the 17th.
Sure, and while Stan's getting up, if I could just add, you're right, but we also, that doesn't mean we have to hold everything up to make it perfect.
Couldn't agree more.
We can do the rezoning, and then when things start to come in, then you get the more finesse, the finesse questions on zoning, and those can be addressed later, but I would just encourage us not to hold everything up because we want to get, what is it, don't let perfect be the enemy of good?
All right, thank you. So I think we've hit this slide enough here, the past couple comments with the two things we're doing tonight. So how do we get to a comprehensive plan to the zoning ordinance? As we talked about, comprehensive plans are very visionary, guidelines, desired state of Fairview. Then we would move to a regulatory framework which takes the vision and develops key concepts designed to produce the desired outcomes and allows for discussion and concurrence. And then we would go into the zoning ordinance, which is the regulatory document, and it creates the conditions and the binding resolutions. And then we're right here where everybody, we're going to start talking tonight about getting some feedback and make sure we heard the right stuff on the October meeting. So this is based on the discussion on the October 17th meeting, we expanded the boundary a little bit here. So initial discussions talked about moving it out from Fairview and the tracks here a little bit more to the northeast. And so we caught some of those areas here. There was a discussion down at 2nd and Williams to include these properties along 2nd Street here to square this off.
Right.
And then there was some additional discussion about here along Burlington and this multifamily development here. So we did do that. I know there was discussion about where the school is, so the school's on the map now just so we could show that in relative terms, although again the boundary does not extend that far. And then bringing it up along Maple here and then along the railroad tracks to Prospect Street, or Prospect Avenue, my apologies. And then coming on just a little bit on the north side of Rogers there, so we catch the north side of Rogers, and then back to sort of the point of beginning up here by Hummer Park. So those are the revised boundaries based on the discussion we heard on the 17th of October by the Village Council. The next thing that we talked about on the 17th was this concept of whether the existing land uses are appropriate or whether the industrial uses provide an opportunity to redevelop for different uses. And this is what staff understood, was this more look at these industrial uses and if there might be something more appropriate in those guys. Understanding that we all did like some of the more artisanal things that were in there in that area as well. And then we also talked a little bit about auto-oriented uses as well, about how we understood it from the conversations that occurred on the 17th, about that we should look for other uses other than auto-oriented uses. That concludes the short second half of the presentation tonight about the boundaries. Happy to get feedback on the boundaries and the line that we've drawn. Again, this is the planning boundary, this is the study area. This does not necessarily mean the potential TIF boundary or rezoning boundary, which is what area we would look to see these comp plan recommendations implemented in. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Another check down meeting. So what do we think about the lines that are drawn?
Yes.
All right, somebody's got to have some dissent here, so I'll have some dissent. There's two things that I thought were not maybe exactly the way I'd hoped. One of them was the current exclusion of the southeast corner of 2nd and Fairview.
Down in this area right here.
Yeah. So it seems like some of that corner, with the new building on the north side of 2nd Street, that seems like part of what you'd want to have included if you were trying to master plan an area or encourage people to redevelop an area. That intersection, I think, is, kind of important to me.
It is a larger lot.
Sure.
Isn't that one a side-by-side?
I think
it is.
Is that one a
Yeah,
side-by-side?
I think
I
that's
think
right.
it's a 2-unit, yes.
Yeah.
So
I agree with that, Mayor.
That was one thing.
So everybody nodding
Yes.
on that? Does
Yeah,
this
it's a
expand,
multifamily.
get that corner just a little bit wider, right in here?
Yeah.
Sure.
They're just the planning lines.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so to Martin's point,
Yeah.
these are areas that would be potentially subject to the recommendations. That's
Right.
really all
Right.
this is, right?
It's
So-
already multifamily.
What they do is that open for business thing, though. They start to give people, somebody says, I want to look at this area, I've got an idea, they start to give them some sense of what we think might make sense, and where we think things ought to fall. And I think that's helpful to guys. So, And then the similar kind of a thing at Third Street, I feel like, I'm not sure what the purpose of adding 2 residential parcels down in Fairview past Third Street is.
Right here, these two here?
Yeah,
So pull this back a little, Mayor.
that would be my preference.
Pull it
yeah.
back to here.
Right.
Is there an answer to the question?
Yeah, I'd be curious.
Yeah, is there?
So those two properties are actually zoned R6, which is our multifamily
Okay.
zoning classification. So although they are single-family homes, they're zoned R6. So that's,
Okay.
I believe that's why we identified
why
it
they
at that
included
point.
Oh, so they're
Then I
potentially
would
ripe
keep
for
them.
some
I just
redevelopment
keep
then?
So I would keep them.
I would keep them if they're zoned for Hamilton.
Keep them in?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm going.
It's just a planning boundary.
Right.
Okay, everybody else good with everything else? Okay.
Excellent. So based on the direction, next time you see us when we're starting to talk about the rezoning framework,
You'll bring that in.
that will be up for consideration, that area at the corner.
Good.
And then, the only other thing we wanted to confirm that we heard right from the last meeting was the potentially conflicting recommendations in the 2017 plan around land uses. And obviously now, let's see the whole picture. The reason we want to know this is because our next steps are this regulatory framework and we built on this. So, Mayor and Council, did we hear you correctly on this guidance inside the box?
Yellow stuff?
Yes.
Yes.
The yellow stuff. Yeah, the yellow stuff. You okay with the yellow?
I like the yellow stuff.
Maybe Martin likes
Let's make
the
it
yellow
green stuff.
And it's very easy to do in PowerPoint. I can make sure I do it every year.
It was more metaphorical than color specification.
All right, I think that's everybody nodding on the yellow stuff.
That is fantastic. I know there might be more to this meeting, Mayor, but we really, like you said, are a check-in, a check-down to make sure that everybody understands the plan. We're implementing how we're going about doing it over multiple years and how we're setting the stage to start the rezoning work, and maybe even as soon as next week or the week after. So we've gotten what we needed from the council tonight, and we'll turn it back over to you.
Okay. I think there's some audience members that want to add something to the conversation. You guys want to tell us your thoughts? Understanding our scope this evening is pretty small.
Well, go ahead. Well, if I'm understanding what the ultimate goal on this is, it sounds like we're trying to create an area which would complement or add to our, what we have now as far as downtown, at least part of this. Is that correct? Because if it is, I would say use our downtown, our existing one now, and learn from it. What works, doesn't work, as far as when you're starting to try to, zone here, there, whatever. Because there's a lot of things downtown that don't work. I mean, we're locked in, of course, it's very tight. And this would be a good opportunity to maybe correct some of that by using existing downtown and maybe apply it to this.
Certainly take our lessons learned from downtown to heart.
Yeah.
Robin, do you have something?
Yeah. Sorry I'm being formal, I didn't know this would be at the last turn, so.
That's fine. No worries.
First, I'm happy to see included in the goals for this project is alignment with the village's overall strategic plans to build strong and diverse local economy and a beautiful community, close quote. For me, the most important words are diverse and beautiful because they are the strongest link to quality of life issues, and I believe these are some of the strongest reasons people come to and stay living in Downers Grove. I support many aspects of this plan, including parking in the rear of buildings, reducing the amount of land area dedicated to surface parking lots, traffic studies, installing and enhancing gateway features such as signing and landscaping, developing regulations to encourage mixed-use, transit-oriented development that is appropriate in height. For ends, although my idea of appropriate height is undoubtedly lower than the village's, close friends, improving pedestrian and bicycle facilities and buffering nearby residential areas. So there's a lot I like about it. I note that the short-term implementation of the framework tonight of this plan includes amendments to the zoning ordinance and zoning map. I assume this is part of exploring incentives and financing opportunities to fund necessary property and infrastructure improvements and to facilitate parcel assembly to foster comprehensive redevelopment. To this, I would like to reiterate my request that the village establish inclusionary zoning in its amendments. During the June 20th council meeting, I know, I never forget, discussion about Lot 2 of the Civic Center project, council members agreed inclusive housing is an important and relevant issue meriting a larger, more substantial discussion around the need for inclusionary housing and its relationship to diversity and income levels in Downers Grove. Council members also voiced the opinion that the Fairview project would be an appropriate one for inclusionary housing. And in fact, in this area, we're losing a property that is low-income housing to redevelopment. Inclusionary housing policies create affordable housing for lower-income families by requiring or incentivizing developers to include a percentage of affordable units in new residential or commercial developments. These policies can vary in their design and implementation, provide access to neighborhoods with services and amenities, and make stable, quality housing accessible to more people. These policies not only help address the larger affordable housing crisis by creating local affordable housing units with little or no public subsidy, but they also promote economic diversity and inclusivity in the housing market by ensuring that everyone has access to safe, affordable, and quality housing, regardless of their income, race, ethnicity, gender, age, or other characteristics. And inclusionary zoning policies can be designed to provide incentives for developers participating in an inclusionary program to earn returns that are equivalent to or greater than what would otherwise be possible by including offsets to compensate owners for the lost revenue associated with the affordable units and through other means. In summary, by establishing inclusionary zoning policies, Downers Grove can play its small role in helping address the larger affordable housing crisis, promote economic diversity and inclusivity, and create a stronger community. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Warner, hang on one second. Just to clarify for anybody that's watching this later, things like this, guys, are conceptual to get people thinking and talking. There's no parcels within this thing are like specifically identified as being replaced by any particular thing, by any particular group or person at this point. It's open for business and trying to develop zoning that makes that known and easier for folks down the road is really what's in play here. So just some
I
clarity.
understand. Thank you.
Order?
Hi. I apologize because I've not been involved in the discussion. I don't know a lot about the background. But in terms of my own background, for 40 years I was involved with community mental health. And there were several projects that I was involved with. And there are several questions then that arise. One is for the council to define the purpose. For example, many times people with mild disabilities are not really found in our communities because they go to nursing homes. The state of Illinois has a very powerful nursing home industry because they house people that people don't really want to see because there is not housing available in the community. About, a million years ago, when I was working, I worked with the village of LaGrange. The village of LaGrange worked with us at that time to identify who people were from LaGrange who were in a nursing home who could live independently in the community. We identified approximately 30 to 35 people just located in West Suburban Cook that were LaGrange residents. LaGrange then established housing facilities in the village of LaGrange where these individuals lived. They were termed Scylla housing. Scylla is still a concept that is available today, and I know of agencies that use Scylla. What it does, it brings people back to a community because in terms of what purpose you're talking about, bicycle paths, you're talking about so forth, I just moved from a community which was Western Springs. They were involved in the past 15, 20 years with a multitude of teardowns. Build $1 million house, people will come. They will have an expectation that they, have the bicycle paths, they have sidewalks, that they have trees. What do we do with people who have disabilities and maybe cannot afford $1 million house, maybe cannot ride a bicycle? Those individuals most likely will go to a nursing home. And therefore, for Downers Grove, because of the size of the community, there are probably quite a number of people who are disabled. And the question is, what do you do with the children of the people who have disabilities, and where are they going to live once they turn 18 or older? Can they live in this community? And therefore, when we are looking at housing, the question for the council is, what is it that you want to achieve? If you want to achieve $1 million house, build it and they will come. If you want to build alternate types of housing, build it and they will come. I was involved about 4 or 5 years ago in the village of Elgin. They took up a whole vacant block and they're building a community for people with disabilities. The village made the commitment to those persons and they're building that community. Therefore, my question is, what is your purpose?
I think the other thing to look at, my name's Richard, last name is Rodriguez. I've lived at 15 7th Street for over 8 years. I've got a next door neighbor, Joni, who's 87 years old, and another neighbor who's in her 70s. Both of them are widows. I have a daughter who passed 2 years ago who was involved with the C-SPAR program. That has individuals that have some developmental issues. I think a good way to look at this is to have some inclusion on this. Joni's 87, she still drives. And she'll probably stay there till the day she dies. If you walk down 7th Street, there are a ton of people, it's a residential community, and they all know each other. Do you want to have a system where the children of these individuals will live there? I have a friend, Ellen, whose son just got married in May. Are we going to have a community where those people are welcome or they can't live there anymore? I've seen changes going on Victor and what have you. That's great for some people, but not great for everyone. And maybe when you have the children of individuals who have lived in a community no longer able to afford to live there, you really have to look at that. It's not a political issue, it's just a common sense issue.
Anyone else? Okay.
We'll start working on the rezoning framework the next time we meet on this topic, Mayor. Thank you.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Mayor, I move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you all. We are adjourned.